Okay, so B'siyata D'Shmaya, first and foremost, I just want to welcome all of you and thank you for coming, each and every one of you. It means a great deal to me, it means a great deal to us, and I think that, like we were speaking a little bit before, some of the Chaver, I think it's the seeds of something that I know that I have, and I think and get the feeling that some of you, but I know that many, many more Yidden outside the context of this room, it's the seeds of something all of us have been waiting for, which I think is really a community of growth-oriented Jews that are looking to take their Yiddishkeit very seriously and to take it to the next level, not just in the sense of devoting more time to learning or trying to daven better or have a little bit more of a commitment, whether it comes to mitzvos, but beyond that, not just in breadth but in depth, to go within Shabbos that we're already keeping and to go within the experience of tefillin that we're already wearing, and maybe not just to work on tefillah in the sense of getting a better understanding of what the words actually mean, but is there a greater and grander experience, spiritually speaking, that tefillah can open us up to? And I think that this kind of messaging is really best experienced among a group of Jews who, by virtue and dint of their distinction externally, just in terms of age and background and stage, and that itself speaks to the fact that b'pnimius, on the inside, it's mamish one. It's really bound together. And it makes no difference what your background is, and it makes no difference which shul you daven in, or what your religious affiliation may or may not be, or what community you live in. It makes no difference. This kind of Torah speaks to a point within all of us which is identical, and that point is a point of yearning. And that point is a point of openness, and that point is a point that's constantly looking to find a way to enable Yiddishkeit to become an encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the truest, deepest way. So I think that this is just the very, 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 very beginning of something that B'siyata D'Shmaya is going to, hopefully, with Hashem's help, turn into something both in quantity and in quality that we can all be very excited about and very grateful for. B'siyata D'Shmaya, I know that I am, for this opportunity to meet each of you individually. But we should have the feeling in this moment that this is like the pioneer. This is like the early days of a great thing, of a great movement, of a great return, of a great awakening. B'siyata D'Shmaya, all through the teachings of Pnimius HaTorah, of the tzaddikim, who foresaw 250, 300 years ago exactly what we were going to go through today and what we need to stay sane. Forget about like high religious level, simply to stay sane and to find meaning in life. In every moment, in our eating, in our drinking, in our sleeping, in our working, in our spousal relationships, with Hashem, Mazel Tov again, right? More recent, and what it means to be a parent, and what it means to be a friend, and so on and so forth. Because we can live life on the level of context alone, and never really find the content that all that context is supposed to hold space for. And so, B'siyata D'Shmaya, I invite you, and I beg from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we should have the Siyata D'Shmaya together to go ahead and to try to discover what is the content of Yiddishkeit. We understand what the framework looks like. We understand what we're supposed to do and the do's and don'ts. Okay, but what is it for? What is it for? Can we really, really begin to see Yiddishkeit as a portal to Dveikus, to a true relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with our Creator, with our Father in Heaven, which I believe very strongly is the point of all of this. As Chazal say, Rahman Ali Babai, Hashem is after the heart. Shir HaShirim is all about love and romance and passion, and a true openness and a true spiritual experience with Hashem's help. So B'siyata D'Shmaya, let's dive into our sources for tonight, and we begin with Hashem's help with this very enigmatic and incredible Gemara in Shabbos. It's hard to believe. Honestly, I really think we could write a whole kuntris, maybe even a sefer on this Gemara alone, because it's so confounding. It's so difficult to understand. And let's go through it together. B'siyata D'Shmaya will try to understand it in the context of Shabbos and Parshas Noach, all with the help of the Master of the World, and again, filled with gratitude for each of you. So thank you for being here. Amr Shmuel Bar Nachmani, Amr Rabbi Yonasan. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, in the name of Rabbi Yonasan, my diksiv, what is the reason that the pasuk tells us, Ki ata avinu, it's a pasuk in Nachum, I'm forgetting exactly where, but the pasuk tells us that Am Yisrael say to Hashem, Ki ata avinu, you're our father. You, Hashem, are our father. Ki Avram leyadanu. Because Ki'ilu, it sounds as if Am Yisrael is saying Avraham didn't know us. V'Yisrael leyakirenu. And it seems a reference to Yaakov Avinu didn't recognize us. But Ata Hashem Avinu Gayaleinu Me'olam Shemecha. But God, you alone, you're our true Father. Avram didn't make the cut. Crazy, because we say Avram Avinu. Hey, thanks for coming, Akiva. We say Avram Avinu. There are source sheets if you want on the Beis Medrash, on the right side, front table. But if you want to grab one or look on. It's as if Avram didn't make the cut. Yaakov Avinu, not worth it. Okay, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're our Father. Says the Gemara, there's going to come a day when Hashem says to Avram Avinu, Banecha chatuli, your descendants have sinned to me. Banecha chatuli. What's Avram Avinu's response? Ribono shel olam, master of heaven and earth, Yimachol kedusha shemecha. Let them be wiped out. Let them be sacrificed for the sanctification of your name, to die al kiddush Hashem. Now, that doesn't sound like a very Abrahamic thing to say. It's not Avram Avinu is the pillar of chesed. Like, really? It's so flippant? Like, no back and forth? Like, Siddim he's willing to fight for. Okay, just wipe him out. Like, doesn't sound right. And so, you have to look in the Mefarshim. There's so much, the Maral and the Ben Ish Chai goes very deeply into the Chidah. There's so much to say here. We don't have time to get into the nitty-gritty of it, but we'll try to get the picture. But just off the cut, I mean, it sounds very strange. Okay, so Amar Le Yaakov. So then Hashem turns away from Avram and he goes to Yaakov Avinu. And he says the same thing, but this time Hashem assumes that Yaakov Avinu is going to respond in a little bit of a more favorable way to have a late Sargil Abanim. Because Yaakov Avinu understood what it was to have children that didn't behave so nicely. So maybe he's going to have gone through that experience and still have the fortitude to believe in Am Yisrael. Maybe he'll daven for them. Amar Le, so Hashem comes to Yaakov and he says the same thing. Banecha chatu, your children sinned. Amar Lefanav, same thing. Ribono shel olam, Yimachu kedusha shemecha. Wipe them out. Wipe them out. Amar, says Hashem, Loi besave taima, v'loi bedardiki eitza. The grandfather doesn't have any reason, and the grandchild, reference to Yaakov, is not either holding. Who's he going to go to next? There's only one Av left. Amar Leli Yitzchak. HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to Yitzchak Avinu, and he says the same thing. Banecha chatuli, your children have sinned to me. Omer lefanav. So Yitzchak Avinu, very surprisingly, of course, because Yitzchak always represents the midah of din, the midah of gevura, strict judgment. This is not what we'd expect Yitzchak Avinu to fill this slot. He says, Master of heaven and earth, banai, v'lei banecha. He says, they're my children and not your children? Because Hashem said, banecha chatuli. Like, your kids are starting up with me. He says, they're my kids, they're not your kids. At Har Sinai, when Am Yisrael stood up and they said, Nasa, we will do, even before Nishma, even before understanding, over there you were okay calling them my child. And now, he says, Ashav Banai, v'lo banecha, now they're my children, but you don't feel that you have that relationship, that connection with them? Hayitachin. What happened here? Va'oid, he says, and he presses further, he says, listen to me. Kama chatu, how much could they have sinned? Kama shnoisav shal adam, average, certainly back then, right? But average, how long does a person live? Sachakol, 70 years he lives. Shivim shana. Dal esrin delay anashtalayu. Subtract 20 that they don't get punished for, so that's not part of the cheshbon. Take 20 away from 70. Pashulu chamishim, so you're left with 50. The Gemara does the math for you, right? In certain other Gemaras in Sukkah, you're not so lucky. Like over here, it like spells it out, like simple subtraction. It's good for guys like me, at least. Very creative person. Math is not my thing. But okay, so fine. The Gemara tells us you take away 20, you're left with 50. Now, of those 50, dal eser mechamsho dililvasa. Take away 25. That it's the nighttime. Presumably, people are sleeping. And the Mefarshim asks, what do you mean? The nighttime is the most sinful time. Okay, they deal with it. We can't get into every prat now. Take away 25. So how much are you left? Pashalu ar eser mechamisha. They're left with 25 years. Now, dal tarte srei upalga. Take away 12 and a half. They're either praying 3 times a day, or they're using the restroom, or they're eating. Right? So they're not sitting when they're doing those things. Take 12 and a half years away. And you're left with 12 and a half years. Sachakol. Not 12 and a half years of sinning, 12 and a half years of the possibility that they may have been doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So he says like this, listen to this. Im ata soivel as kulam, Yitzchak Avinu says to Hashem, if you're going to handle those 12 and a half years, mutaf, excellent. Ve'im lav, and if not, palgi alai, upalga Allah. I'll take half and you'll take half. Between us, we'll divide and conquer. It'll be good. I'll cover for half. You'll cover for half. And says Yitzchak to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you'll say that all of them should be on me, I already gave myself completely to you. I am yours. A reference to the Akedah, where Yitzchak Avinu went and sacrificed himself potentially. So he says, you put them all on me, there is no me. I already gave myself to you. Then Am Yisrael announced, okay, Ki ata Avinu. Yitzchak, you're our father. You're our father. And Amalahem Yitzchak says, Ad sha'ata mekalsim li, before you start praising me, kalsel HaKadosh Baruch. Look up to the heavens and praise the Master of heaven and earth. And Yitzchak Avinu hints to them, look up with his eyes. Amazing Gemara. Look up. With his blind eyes, you might remember, because Yitzchak couldn't see. So dafka, blind eyes. There's so much in this Gemara. I'm telling you, we could go on for hours. We have a lot to accomplish. But Be'ezer Hashem, immediately Am Yisrael look up to the heavens, and then they say this pasuk, Ata Hashem Avinu. Because in the beginning they were saying Ki Ata Avinu, they were referring to Yitzchak. After Yitzchak tells them, don't praise me, praise Hashem, they say Hashem, okay, you're our Father. It's one of the most incredible Gemaras that really on so many levels is problematic. The most basic problem we already hinted to, we do not expect this, not from Avram, not from Yaakov, but also not from Yitzchak. We don't expect Avram to be so callous and say, give Am Yisrael away, but we don't either expect Yitzchak to be the great defender. Yitzchak is strict judgment. He's not playing games to come ahead and try to cover, I'll take half, you'll take half. Which is also one of the reasons that I saw brought down, just there's so many Ramazim, but one reason perhaps that we split the middle matzah dafka by Pesach. It's the middle matzah that we take and we break in half. And one of the reasons given is that the three matzahs correspond to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The middle matzah corresponded to Yitzchak. Yitzchak's the one who said half on me, half on you. So by the Pesach Seder, we want to awaken that kind of limud zchus. We break the matzah in half, because that's the inyan of Yitzchak based on this Gemara. Okay, there's a lot to say. Let's put that aside for a moment, have that in the back of our head, and let's launch in to this pasuk in Bereshis, the very first time that we find a reference to Shabbos Kodesh. And I just want to also acknowledge everybody who's on the Zoom. Thank you guys so much for joining. Whoever's watching on Facebook Live, mamash, a privilege. A big yichud is happening here. UK and Eretz Yisrael and America. It's a great thing. It's a great thing. Thanks for being a part of it. Says the Heilige Pasuk in Bereshis, Vayivarech Elohim es yoyim hashvi'i vayikadesh oisai. Hashem blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. Ki vayshabas mikol malachtei asher bara Elohim la'asais. Because it was on Shabbos that Hashem ceased from all the work and all the labor of creating the world in the first 6 days. He stopped. He rested. And Hashem sanctified and blessed Shabbos. The Gemara tells us what's sanctified and blessed. What's Vayivarech Vayikadesh? Rashi brings over there, based on the Gemara, that the Gemara says that it's a reference to the man. That the man did not fall on Shabbos, Vayikadesh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said that Shabbos is not a time that the man is going to fall. So then where did they get man from in the desert to eat on Shabbos? Erev Shabbos fell twice. That's Vayivarech. So Vayivarech Elikim Asiyam Hashvi Vayikadesh Osai is Hashem blessed the man doubly to fall on Friday because Vayikadesh Osai, because Shabbos was sanctified in the sense that the man did not fall. That's what the Gemara tells us based on these two words. The Baal Turim points out an amazing thing. Vayivarech Elohim Gimel Desmiche. There are 3 times in the entire Tanakh that we find these two words next to each other. Vayivarech Elikim. This expression. This is the days before computers. He wasn't Googling this. Can you imagine to be able to say that definitively? It's also a crazy story that the Baal Turim wrote the whole Sefer Baal Turim on the Torah, which is a very interesting commentary, which basically points out how many times this word comes up and where it is. He wrote it in one night, they say. They say he wrote it in one night. There's a whole story, because that would make sense. Like, when else was he doing this? They say in one night he sat, went through the entire Tanakh, and in his head he was able to write down exactly how many times things showed up. An amazing thing. 3 times this formulation of Vayivarech Elikim shows up in Tanakh. Hacha, the first time is here, in reference to Shabbos. God blessed Shabbos, number 1. The Idach, and the other time is in our Parsha, Vayivarech Elihim es Noach. Hashem blessed Noach. We're going to read the context of these psukim in a minute. V'idach, and the third time, vayevarich Elohim es Yitzchak. After Avram Avinu died, passed away, was nostalgic, the pasuk tells us that Hashem blessed Yitzchak. Let's look at these psukim inside, just to get a little bit of context. The first pasuk, which is in our parsha, Parshas Noach, the pasuk says, vayevarich Elohim es Noach. After the Mabul is over, Noach and his children leave the Teva. Hashem blessed Noach and told him, Ezbanav and his children, Vayoram Alehem, and he told him, Pru uravu, be fruitful and multiply, have children, umeluas haaretz, fill the world with humans, because there was no other humans. It was just Noach and his children and their wives. And Hashem was telling them, establish humankind again, and he gave them that blessing. That's the second time that we find these words, Vayevarich Elohim es Noach, the first time being in reference to Shabbos. The third time is in reference to Yitzchak Avinu. Says the pasuk later on. It shouldn't say Bereshis 1:9. It's a mistake. It's a pasuk later on. Vayihi acharei mois Avraham. It was after Avraham had passed on. Vayevarich Elohim es Yitzchak. HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed Yitzchak. Vayeshev Yitzchak in be'er l'chai roi. And Yitzchak settled in be'er l'chai roi. This is the third time that this formulation Vayevarich Elohim shows up. The first in reference to Shabbos, the second in reference to Noach, and the third in reference to Yitzchak Avinu. Journey with me into the world of Berditchev, into the city of Berditchev, into these narrow, twisted cobblestone streets. In a time before technology, in a time when night comes, it's night, and when morning comes, it's morning, and when there's an air of sanctity in the narrow alleyways. And let's journey together to the Beis Medrash of the Berditchevers, Chosiyah Aleinu, the Kedushas Levi. Says the Heilige Tzaddik, Mamash, open your hearts to this piece. I'll tell you the truth. The first time I learned Sefer Kedushas Levi was 10 years ago. And I made a lot of notes in the Sefer, as I like to do, in Sfarim that I'm working on. And the pieces that really spoke to me, so I made a mark next to. And if they spoke to me a lot, so I would make like 2 arrows. All my Sfarim are underlined, came out like there's nothing that's not underlined, and highlighted in the whole thing. And this year, one of my projects is I'm reviewing Kedushas Levi. And it's astounding to me that there are pieces that I must have either not understood or didn't speak to me at that point in the journey that this time are my favorite pieces, and I'm mind blown over them. This is one of them. I push it. I have no notes. I have no underlines. I have no checks. I don't know. It's like I didn't get it, and I've been learning this piece, mamish, even though it's from last week's parsha, every day. Mamish, I cannot stop thinking about this teaching. Let's learn it together. The pasuk says at the very end of Bereshis, "V'Noach matza chen be'enei Hashem." Noach found grace in the eyes of God. Says the Berditchever, for this line it was worth coming tonight, I believe. For this line alone. Im Adam moitzi chen be'enei Hashem, as hu Noach. If a person feels that they find grace in the eyes of Hashem, their perception of the way that God perceives of them is okay. They're okay by Hashem. As hu Noach. Loshen menucha. Sheyesh le menucha. That gives a person comfort. This line is enough, because I think it really captures what it is that we're after. Isn't this all we need? Isn't this all we need to know that we're good? That we're good? That we live our life against the backdrop of being okay with all of who we are. And obviously that means we have to put in the ishtadlus to try to work and to do our avodas and so on and so forth. But isn't that the feeling that all of us are after? You lay down in bed at night and there's a menucha, there's an existential comfort of knowing that you're okay in the highest, most grand objective of the capital O sense of the word. You're okay. Says the Berditchever, that's pshat in the pasuk. Noach matza chen be'enei Hashem. Not that Noach found grace in the eyes of God and Hashem loved Noach. He says, Noach, there's no greater menucha. There's no greater comfort than matza chen be'enei Hashem. Than to know that you're okay by Hashem. Amazing line. Bihi matza chen be'enei Hashem. Parenthetically, don't want to get caught up on this point, but parenthetically, fascinatingly enough, there's a pasuk that's the exact contrast of this which is a reference to Er, son of Yehuda, brother of Onan. The pasuk says, did what was ra be'enei Hashem, what was not okay in the eyes of God. And I actually heard, I think it was from Reb Shlomo Katz, I think that I say this over b'shem. I'm wondering if he got it from a sefer. I don't know. I have to follow up with him. But I once heard him say that the eyes are like a mirror. Rabbi Nachman has a Torah about this also. The eyes reflect. They reflect. If you look deeply into a person's eye, you see yourself. It's a very deep thing. The eyes reflect like a mirror. And a mirror, what a mirror does is it causes letters to flip around. So if you're wearing a sweatshirt that says whatever it says, in the mirror it's the same letters, but it's just the other way around, right? Flips, it's reversed. It says an amazing thing. Noach matzachein be'enei Hashem. Do you know why Noach was a tzaddik? Because when Noach looked at himself in the eyes of Hashem, the letters Noach flipped around, spell chen. So when he looked at Hashem, he saw himself as being okay, and that gave him the strength to be a tzaddik. But the son of Yehuda, when he looked in the reflective eyes of Hashem, he saw Ra be'enei Hashem. And that's what led. Do you understand? It was a self-labeling. It was a self-perception.
Why is it a self-perception? Doesn't it say, in other words, that's objective, no?
If?
That's objectively saying that.
Im adam matzachein? Sure, that's an objective truth.
That's objectively.
Sure it is. Sure it is. Of course it is.
As a result of that, he'll have menucha.
Of course it is. The question is, this Torah, which I said is parenthetic, is not the same exact thing, says, well, where do you get the strength to do the objective right in the eyes of Hashem? It begins first with a self-definition. You hear? It begins with with not allowing society or experiences or mistakes or whatever we go through to label us and lock us into a certain perception that will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So Shlomo's Torah comes before this Torah. In Echanami, the B'ditchever is saying that's the ultimate objective goal that we're striving for, to really find in Echanami. But the question is, what comes first? Okay, fine. V'zeshanu oimrim Magen Avraham. And this is what we say, Magen Avraham, which literally means the shield of Abraham, the shield of Avram Avinu. We refer to the Avos in the beginning of Shemana Esrei, and we end Baruch Atah Hashem, Magen Avraham. What does it mean on a literal level? It means Hashem guards Avram, protects Avraham. But he says, no, it means something deeper. What it means is Avraham hu chesed ki yadua. Avram Avinu represents the midah of chesed, the trait of loving kindness. You know what we're saying when we say Magen Avraham? Not that Hashem shields Avraham, but that there's no greater shield for the Jewish nation than Avraham, meaning the midah of chesed. That's what it means. We say Magen Avraham, Baruch Atah Hashem, that Magen, you protect the Jewish nation with Avraham. You hear the difference? With the midah of chesed, not that you protect Avraham, you protect us with the trait of loving kindness that's embodied by Avraham Avinu. He protects us from that kind of attribute. And the same thing, and this is we get to the point of Shabbos, Magen David. And we also have an expression when we say that Hashem is Magen David, which again means on a literal level, the protector of David HaMelech, but says the B'ditchever, it means much deeper. Because David is also representative of a trait, of a midah with which Hashem would protect the Jewish nation. What's the midah of David HaMelech? Malchus, kingship. How does Hashem protect us with kingship? Did David who midas malchus ki yadua? David HaMelech represents this aspect in which Hashem is our king. B'sifrei Kodesh, as is known from all the holy works. V'Hashem yizbarach baruch hu megin mitzad malchus kenizker b'sifrei Kodesh, and Hashem protects us and holds space for us through the lens and the prism of this relationship that He has with us on the level of being a king, which means kivan shebara olam sheyehe melech, because Hashem created the world so that He could be a king over the world. Why? Because the Ramchal tells us ve'im melech b'lo am. There is no king without a nation. You cannot be a king without a nation. You can't. You can be a slave master, but if you just king over one person, you're not a king. A king has a nation. So that means that the premise of this, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in a certain sense, is simply so that the aspect in which he is the king could come to expression and manifestation. Ve'ein melech b'lei am. Oizer la'am she'yeh nikra shemoy melech. And so HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps the nation without whom he would lack the opportunity to express his kingship. In a certain sense, what we do for him, with this Hashem protects us. That no matter what our circumstance is, no matter what we're going through, no matter how much we're failing to live up to the standard that we're trying to reach, at the very basis of our identity, beyond what we may or may not be doing, we hold value in as much as we exist, because it is through us that Hashem has the opportunity to be called a king. It's a very elemental protection, meaning when all else is lost, Hashem protects us through the midah of Malchus, Magen David. What's the protection? That even if we're not worthy, and even if we're undeserving, but we are, meaning we exist as human beings. What's value in that? Just a human being. The potential to crown Hashem king over us. And with that, Hashem says, it's worth keeping you around. You hear this? This is a different Hagana than Chesed. Chesed means, okay, Hashem just, he loves us. More clearer, more sharp?
Chesed isn't about, oh, you want to cuddle? Chesed is the potential. The root of Chesed is the potential. The root of Din is not about, oh, I'm going to give you a smack. Din is the absurdity about the fact that we don't deserve it.
Right.
It's not about you're the bad cop now. Chesed is the potential for the future. Din is the reality of the fact that we have no right to exist. So Chesed and Malchus is very, very come out the same thing.
Interesting. Okay, fine. You want to say that Magen Avram and Magen David is two ways of expressing the same thing. The Berditchever seems to make a chilik between them, and we'd have to spend more time than we have now. We have to move, and there's so much to talk about here, and we're going to talk Be'ez Hashem in the weeks to come and forever and all eternity. And Yerushalayim HaKadosh B'meir B'meinu Be'ez Hashem at the third Beis Hamikdash tonight already. But after this year, no, I'm kidding. Right now. But the Nakuda, he seems to make somewhat of a distinction between them. So we have to give thought as to why. So why does it say Magen David? Why does it say Magen Avram? Okay, fine. But this Indian of Magen David means that Hashem protects us in a very elemental way. Very, very elemental way. If you're here in the world, you have already a verification mark on you, and that verification mark means you play a very important role in the world. And that HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs you in a certain sense, and as much as he needs anything, which of course he doesn't, he needs you. He needs you. Because it's through you and through us that he can reveal his kingship even on a bad day. By having human beings in the world that have the potential to recognize him. This is the Hagana, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu protects Am Yisrael through the midah of Malchus, and that's called Magen David. V'zeu Pirish HaMedrash, and with this we can understand the Medrash that says Vayichal Elihim B'yom HaShvi'i. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, literally it means Hashem seized, completed, like from the word kol, Vayichal, he stopped. B'yom HaShvi'i, on the seventh day. That's what it means on a literal level, says the Medrash. The word Vayichal could mean concluded or completed, but it could also be seen as a derivative of the word kilayon, which means to yearn. You ever heard the terminology kilyon einayim? Or nichsefa v'gam kolsa nafshi, a tremendous yearning. Says the Medrash, you know what it means? Not that God concluded his work on the seventh day. Hashem yearned on the seventh day. What does this mean? Says the Berditchever, Shekasav b'yoyim hazayin melachtai ayin sham. That's what the Medrash says. Hashem yearned for his creation on the seventh day. But akavana, what that means is Malchus, the Shabbos, who Malchus kanoda b'kisvei Arizal. Shabbos represents this aspect of Malchus. That's why we refer to Shabbos as Shabbos Malkusa. Shabbos is the Shabbos queen. Shabbos is the level of Malchus. Without getting to the depth of it now, Shabbos is the seventh day, and the seventh midah in the Spheros is Malchus, without getting into it. Shabbos is Malchus. Says the Berditchever, that's the meaning of the Medrash. Vayichal Elokim b'yom hashvi. What did God yearn for in creating the world? The midah, the trait represented by the seventh final day, which was now there's a creation that has the capacity to crown Hashem king. And that's God's ultimate objective. That's what he yearned for on the seventh day. Not that he concluded his work on the seventh day. The seventh day captures the manifestation of God's objective, his ratzon, his will to create the world. Okay, that comes to fruition on the seventh day. Sof Maseh, what manifests at the end of the creative process, reflects b'machshava tchila, his initial desire. What was his initial desire? To be called a king, to be able to represent, to be able to express his kingship. And that is manifest in the seventh day, which is Shabbos. Hakavana again, machmas to Shabbos hu malchus kereda b'kitzvi Arizal. Shabbos is malchus. On Shabbos, when Hashem focuses on that trait of malchus, and a king, of course, like you said, needs a nation. So on the seventh day, everything that had been created was ready to express Hashem's interest in creation, his motive, his objective, his desire. Because Shabbos is the midah of Malchus, meaning finally now, with the world, with a plethora of different creations, and certainly the human enterprise, human beings, Hashem's objective can come to fruition, where he is finally being able to be called a king, a melech. Ratzaloymar, Shalom Asiyah. The koisev malachta asher asa, as the pasuk continues, which is a reference to the physical world, the world of Asiyah, the world of action. Adam, a man. In this world, we represent the ultimate objective of Hashem's creation of all of this is us right now in this moment, you and me, as we are, in our potential capacity to recognize that there's a king in this world, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the king. Ki ikar malchusei k'viyacha baruch hu sha'adam hu, shu ba'olam hazeh oived. The ikr, the primary expression of Hashem's kingship, is that man who exists in this world serves Hashem. As is brought in the holy works. Because to the malachim above, there's no big chiddush, there's no big novelty that they serve God. Of course they serve God. They have any inclination to do anything other than to do the will of God. So what did God really desire? He really desired what was manifest on the seventh day, which is the midah of Malchus and the culmination of creation, within which man could finally stand up and serve as the nation to crown Hashem king. To be a mazayin who is staklis HaMalchus, kasaf olam asiyah. Hashem yearned for the created world, du Adam, man, sheba olam hazeh, in this world, nikra Adam olam asiyah. And it's a reference to that. Asher asa is a reference to man. Shal yidei nikra shmei melech, ki melech hu al yidei am v'havin. That's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is called Melech. So, of course, again, we were a little bit rushed for time. What's the connection between the first part of this piece, of this teaching, and the second part? Seems to be, right? Again, the first part he starts with, when does man find grace in the eyes of Hashem? Or when does man have true menucha? When he finds grace in the eyes of Hashem. And then all of a sudden he launches into this whole thing about Hashem desiring the seventh day, and Magin David. That's Hashem protects us through this aspect of David, that we represent the opportunity for Hashem's malchus to be revealed. What's the kesher? The kesher is very simple. The kesher is very simple, and the kesher is very deep. And I think this is what I missed the first time, which is why I didn't appreciate this piece fully. And I'm sure, by the way, in 10 years I'll revisit this and I'll have a whole new understanding, and I hope you'll still be with me. We'll learn it together. But at this moment in time, this is what it appears to me. Noach is a reference to Shabbos. The Zohar Kadosh says, Eila told us Noach is tzaddik. The Zohar says, Shabbos de le'ela and Shabbos de le'sata. There are two Noachs. Eila told us Noach, 2 times. One is a reference to what the Zohar says is a Shabbos above, and one is what the Zohar refers to as a Shabbos below. Why? What's the connection? Because the word Noach is connected to the word menucha, which means rest, which was the prediction of his whole Torah, right? Noach matzachein be'en Hashem. When do you have menucha? But Shabbos ba menucha. Shabbos is the day of menucha. Chaver, listen to this. Open your heart to the deepest depth of the world, mamish. Listen to this. I think this is the pshat in the prediction. when all is lost, when all else is lost, how do I have the capacity to still feel okay? To still feel like I'm worth something, even when I'm undeserving? We said before, the mugging David, the aspect of the fact that Hashem put me in this world and created the whole world so that I could be here with my Yetzer Hara, not like the Malach, because that he didn't desire, with all of my humanity, so that I have the potential to work on myself so that I can try to let God in and serve Him. Amazing thing. Shabbos, therefore, in its encapsulation and reflection of the midah of Malchus with which Hashem protects us, captures the ultimate menucha. Because it is what allows me to be moitzechein be'enei. It is what allows me to feel that even when I have nothing else, this I have. What is this? I'm a human being. And in as much as I'm a human being and not an angel, with all of my difficulties, that is exactly what allows me to define myself as a human being. This is very deep. I hope I'm communicating it clearly, properly, with Hashem's help. In as much as I'm a human being, therein lies a limut zchus on me, in and of my humanity, with all my mistakes and all my confusion and all my anxiety and angst, is that Hashem wanted human beings. Hashem dafka wanted human beings. And if you would be an angel all the time, you wouldn't register. It's amazing. You wouldn't register. So you as you, in this given moment, and me as me, have inherently a limut zchus. In that as human, I have the opportunity to give something to God that nobody else without Yetzer Hara, without struggles, without challenges, without difficulties, without pain, without tragedies, that I couldn't give. And that's why Noach is connected to Shabbos, because Shabbos captures the ultimate menucha that is found when? Noach, matzachein be'enei Hashem. When we know that we're worth it. Is this coming across clear? Do you hear the connection between these two parts of the Berditchever?
Can we say it again?
I'll try. With Hashem's help. And then we have to move a little bit forward. We have three essential concepts. We have the concept of Noach as Noach himself. Noach, as his name captures the concept of menucha, which is rest, and rest being associated with Shabbos. What's the connection between Noach, rest, and Shabbos? Because we said, you know what the greatest source of menucha is, of comfort is, of rest is? When we know that we're worth it. When we know that we matter. In an existential sense, we mamish matter. But sometimes we don't feel that way. Sometimes we don't feel like we deserve to matter. Sometimes we don't feel like we're living up to standards. Sometimes we feel pretty down on ourselves. But the answer is that Shabbos encapsulates the point where even if we are undeserving, even if we are human beings with all of our humanity, and we're not angels, we're not acting like angels, in that aspect within which we are human, through the prism of Shabbos, Shabbos is Malchus, is that we're here to crown Hashem King in a way that the angels never could, therein lies the capacity for us to find comfort with our humanity. That it's lichatchila and not b'diavad. That this experience of being a human being is quite literally the apple of Hashem's eye, is His ultimate objective desire. And that's why Noach, matzachein be'enei Hashem, Noach, it's so comforting to find grace in the eyes of God, to know that we're okay. When is the ultimate extent of that truth revealed? On Shabbos. Because on Shabbos, again, connected to the concept of Malchus, of kingship, Shabbos tells us that as human beings, with our humanity, and those parts in our lives that are not angelic, we're uniquely positioned to crown Hashem as king over the world and over our lives. This is the Berditchever. This is what Shabbos is, what Shabbos represents. Let's move into the next piece. Let's try to move a little bit more quickly. Here we get to that pasuk that we started with, that the Balaturim tells us, Vayevarech Elikim shows up two other times, one by Noach and one by Yitzchak. Ratzalaymar says the B'ditchvar al Piyam Avur B'Sifrei Kodesh, what's revealed in the holy works. Da Adam Gam Shuhu Ba'aretz, even though it's true, man is down on this world. Al Yedei Maisav, through his actions, Soicheles Alech Kol Yamav, Kol Yimei Chayav Ba'olam Yisrael Yonim. If we do this world right, you can have your feet on the floor, and you can mamish. You could not be living on Hendon Way and on these streets of it. You could be going to the cleaner. Thank you for reminding me to pick up my cleaners for Shabbos. Thank you. You could be going to the cleaners. You could be dropping your kid off at school. You could be doing this. You could be doing that. And literally, you're the same human being like all the other human beings. You're simply not here, because on the level of your soul and in your mind, the depth that you're connected to within all those experiences allows you to be literally. You're living in the higher realm. Living in the Dare Mala, in the higher realm. Even though you're here, like the ladder of Yaakov Avinu, Sula Mutz of Arza, it's rooted on the floor of Rosh Magia Shemaima. That's the job of a Jew. Don't get caught up in this world. We're here, sir, to elevate, not to allow ourselves to get dragged down into the apparent mundanity of day-to-day existence. Ubeprat b'Shabbos Kodesh, and this is specifically true about Shabbos. Shekedusha Shabbos kol kach gadol. The greatness and the holiness of Shabbos is so incredibly vast. That Shabbos allows a Jew to connect to a very elevated part of his being, to a very holy part of him. Nimtza b'Shabbos chayzer adam l'shorshay. On Shabbos, a person connects to his root. Now, through the lens of the teaching that we just learned, we could understand this on a much deeper level. Shabbos allows us to connect to our root, because the root of a thing is the premise for the thing. What's the purpose for this thing? Shabbos embodies our purpose. So on Shabbos, we can connect to the ultimate purpose for which all of creation was brought into being, to serve as a stage upon which man treads. What's our place in all of this? Is to recognize that there's more to life than what meets the eye. Shabbos clears the fog and allows us to connect directly to our purpose, to our essence in Kedusha, to Hashem's desire for us that transcends us being deserving. Because by very dint of Hashem needing humans, in its ideal setting, Hashem needs people that are people. Not that we should go and try specifically to express our humanity by failing on purpose. We don't have to do that. Life is life. Life is life. Because at the end of the day, we're humans. And this, as the Berditchever, is a remez, v'zeu kivoy shavas mikol malachtei asher bara elikim lasos, which means that on Shabbos, Hashem rested from all the work that He created in the 6 days of the week. But he says the word shavas can mean to stop, to cease, to rest, but it could also mean to return. Shavas, shav, is to return, like tashev, like tshuva. It's also Melashon Shabbos, to return. Says the Berditchever, Shabbos hu Melashon chazar. Shabbos means to return, to go home. Mikol malachtei asher bara elikim lasos. Lasos daika. Shegam melacha shebara ba'olam ha'asiyah du ha'adam. That even man on Shabbos, Shabbos gives us the ability to go home, to connect to the root and the core of our identity. So let's see how he reads the pasuk. Kivoy shavas. On Shabbos, kivoy on Shabbos, shavas. Man is able to escape. Mikol malachtei asher bara elikim lasos. From all the doldrums of the olam ha'asiyah, we're refocused to our core mission, to our identity. What are we here for? What is this whole thing about? Kivoy Shabbos. On Shabbos we return. Amazing. From the Olam HaAsiyah, Shebara ba'Olam HaAsiyah duhu ha'adam, b'Shabbos chayzer la'Olam HaYisrael, we go back, b'machshavti mirod b'hiris for Kedusha Shabbos, because the Kedusha of Shabbos is so incredibly vast. One final piece from the Agar Kala from the Bnei Yissaschar, and then we'll try to tie it together. B'siyata d'shmai, and open it up to questions, comments, conversation further with Hashem's help, and then we have to sing. We absolutely need to sing. After Torah like this, you can't do anything else, can't help yourself. Okay. Says the Bnei Yissaschar, Vayivarech Elikim, same pasuk, and Hashem blessed. Hine lefi pshutai, in accordance with its simple meaning, tevas bracha kishe'ena mefurish mahu habracha, hishitehei ashma mibli mida v'shir. If we find the word blessing, but the word blessing is not quantified in any way. What kind of blessing? What's the nature of the blessing? It just says, and he blessed the day. With what? What does it mean? He blessed. What is it? Anytime we find the word blessing in and of itself, he says it's a reference to a flood of divine life force that's without any measure. It's without any quantifications. Just endless, 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 endless blessing. Because there's no qualifying word that comes after it or before it. So it's just, he says, mi bli need of a shear, it's endless. Endless. That's what the word bracha means. Al kain eina bracha sher b'davar hamadot. That's why the Gemara in Tainus says, true blessing cannot reside or rest on something that's counted. If a person's busy all the time calculating things, really anything in life, growth. Imagine a person, whether you're a teacher or you're a parent or you're a friend, and the whole time you're trying to measure the growth of another person, like in a technical way, point by point, okay, checking this, it's a recipe for disaster. Because everything that needs to grow needs space. It needs space. Because bracha in its essence comes from a place that's not measured. And the second that we start measuring things and putting limits to things and counting our whatever it is that we're doing, whether we're trying, whether it's a streak, let's say, that we're trying to, work on something in Avodas Hashem, and every day, okay, now I'm counting again obsessively. Let go of it. Just be. Let it go. Let it go. Don't be so calculate, because that means that if you're doing that, and if I'm doing that, that means that be'etzem we're cut off from the source of bracha, because bracha comes from Hashem, and Hashem is Ein Sof, so it comes from a place without limit. The second that we try to calculate, so then we're not connected to that channel anymore. Kivin shenitim b'mida v'gvul, so it can't be bracha because you already put it into a limiting framework. This is also what the Zohar Kadosh says, that above, blessing does not reside on anything other than Elef. Elef means 1,000, but Elef also means Aleph, which is just one. Why? Why is blessing connected to one or 1,000? What's unique about the letter Aleph? Ki minyan ha'Aleph chayzer la'Aleph. One keeps on going back to one in the next category. So first it's 1, then it's 10, then it's 100, then it's 1,000, then it's 1,000,000. But it's always 1 million. It's always going back in a new set. It always goes back to Aleph. Aleph, of course, is representative of Hashem. Hashem is infinite. That means that anything that we can count, and math is, I think, is just endless. Endless, you can count and count and count and count and count and keep on counting. Any time that you go into a new category of calculation, goes back to the Echad, Yachad, and Yuchad, because you're drawing on infinity. It's our human minds within a framework of space and time that are able to count and measure things. It's all an illusion. It's just dividing infinity, right? So keep on going back to Aleph. Keep on going back to Aleph. That's where bracha is, says the Zohar. Vishuv maschal aminin. Okay, and then the next set, add Aleph, add le'en shir, till another 1,000, another 1,000,000. Okay, so this is what he says, and this will come to an end with Hashem's help. And the end of this will be the beginning, Be'ezer Hashem, I hope, of a strong cohort of Yidden that are ready to go into Shabbos with Shabbos in a really, really deep, broad, big way. Big way. Be'ezer Hashem. And he says this is what Shabbos represents. God blessed Shabbos. Shabbos is the receptacle of blessing. But he says, what kind of receptacle for blessing? He says, Shetiya birchas v'ashbois hayoim hahu mibli shir. Shabbos is saturated with bracha. We said, what's bracha? Bracha is endless. That means Shabbos, it may seem to just be 25 hours that you can count on a clock. It's not. It's not. It's an experience of infinity captured in time. Is Shabbos. Hashem invested this limited time frame with infinite blessing. And he says, he says the difference between Shabbos and Sukkot, or Shabbos and Chanukah, or Shabbos and Shavuos, and Shabbos and Yantiv, is that The blessing of the Chagim depends on our vessel. How big is our vessel? How much do we prepare for it? How much are we deserving of it? That's the Chagim. Shabbos has nothing to do with this. Shabbos has nothing to do with this. So deep. What a privilege. Shabbos has nothing to do with this. Mashe ein kein b'Shabbos. Af ki ha'adam ein loy kli muchen lekabel kol kach. That even if a person doesn't have a vessel on Shabbos, you see where we're going with this? Even if a person has nothing left on Shabbos, he's undeserving. He's not an angel. And he's mamish tasted his humanity from the weed. Kivin shashpasi hu b'bchinas bracha. Since Shabbos is a reference and a revelation of infinity, it transcends deserving or not deserving. It doesn't matter if you have a vessel or not. Shabbos is the revelation of that which transcends deserving. Shabbos is the revelation of that which is rooted in Hashem's ultimate motivation to have the human being who has the capacity to fail. Shabbos holds space for the human. The Noach matzachein be'enei Hashem. And this is what the Gemara in Shabbos tells us. Kol hameshamer Shabbos, whoever keeps Shabbos, noisnin loy nachla b'li mitzar. We are gifted with what's called a boundaryless inheritance. It has no boundary. Shabbos is infinite. Havin hadavar, and he says, understand this. Let's attempt to with the last 5 minutes. It's tied together. In the Gemara in Shabbos that we had such a difficulty with, if you'll notice, Yitzchak Avinu's taina, in his protection of Am Yisrael, has very much to do with the lived experience of them being humans. Because he immediately says, well, look, they live under the contents of time. Now, how much time is there already? Look, they're humans. So they're sleeping half the time, and then they're eating and drinking half the time, and they're using the restroom not half the time, it depends if there's food over here in a chanami. But they're using the restroom, right? And they're doing human things. They're being humans. With this, Yitzchak protects us. The Baal HaTurim tells us that this word, Vayivarech Elikim, that the Agar Dekala, that the Bnei Yissaschar tells us, is a reference to the capacity for Shabbos to connect with a place within us that's undeserving, that has no vessel, but it makes no difference. That shows up again by Yitzchak Avinu, Vayivarech Elikim, as Yitzchak. And it shows up again by Noach, Vayivarech Elikim as Noach. I believe that these three concepts are mamish bound up one with the other. Noach is a reference to Shabbos. And Shabbos, like we said, encapsulates this, that. We have the capacity to be Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu, specifically us as human beings, not as angels. And so Shabbos is the time, like we said, that when we lost everything and when we don't feel deserving, but on Shabbos we get to tap into the reality, like the B'ditcher says, Kivoy Shabbos, we return to our root, and our root is rooted in Hashem's desire for human beings as human beings with the capacity to recognize that there's a God in the world with all of our failings, with all of our mistakes. And that's Noach. And that's the ultimate of Noach, matzachein be'enei Hashem. Noach is the inyan of when do we feel true menucha, which is of course the menucha of Shabbos, when we're okay in the eyes of Hashem. But Noach matzachein be'enei Hashem. And then that's the inyan of Vayivarech Elikim es Yom HaShvi'i, beracha being that kind of blessing that's transcendent, that makes no difference whether you have a vessel or not. It's a nachla b'li mitzarim. And perhaps this was Yitzchak's inyan. This was Dafka Yitzchak's inyan, to come and protect Am Yisrael. This was his lichatchila to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he says, when all else fails, when there's nothing left, and that's also Midas Hadin Dafka represents. There's nothing. It's just it's withholding. It's not plus. It's undeserving. It's good. It's just gevura. Yitzchak Avinu tells HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sof kol sof, at the end of the day. He says to Hashem, you created human beings. You created human beings. You created human beings who live in a world of asiyah, the world of creation, which is why he makes reference to nasa v'nishma. Only they are nasa. Only they're the ones that live in the world of Asiya, the world of creation. They're my children, they're not your children. You're not their av. What's an av? Av is miloshen ratzon, to desire. You didn't desire them. They're not the manifestation of your ultimate desire. You're not their av. And with this, Yitzchak Avinu is mugging David. We can call it mugging Yitzchak almost. With this, Yitzchak Avinu protects us, that even when it looks like we have nothing left, by dint of our being human, eating, sleeping, we are uniquely positioned to do something for Hashem, even in our undeserving moment, just by the very nature of our being here, that none of the angels can do for Hashem. And with this we'll close. I just was always wondering, okay, very nice. Well, what's this Gemara doing in Shabbos? Could be in any Masechta. This Gemara is Dafka in Shabbos. Because this is the secret of Shabbos. Shabbos holds space for us. Shabbos, the Gemara tells us, even if a person served of a Dezara, like the Dar of Enosh, keeps Shabbos, moichlim lahi, it's forgiven, wiped away. Because Shabbos absolves that. Shabbos justifies our difficulty, our struggle. Shabbos is a place where we can feel comfortable coming in with all of us, which, like I mentioned very much in Shirim, a lot of times, that's why Shlomo Carlebach says, that's why Shabbos we see by Boye B'Shalom, everybody turns around to face the back. So on one level, on the Pashup Shab, the reason that we do that is, of course, because that's where the sun is setting. And so we're greeting Shabbos, as it were. That's where Shabbos is coming in, because that's where the night is coming, right, as the sun sets. But Rav Shlomo says the deepest thing. He says, if you go to a president, a prime minister, a king, a queen, Allah Shalom, you go to a dignitary, and you came from the airport, you can't bring your bags in with you. You stop by the airport, the hotel first, you leave your baggage, and then you go, and you walk in, you don't come in with your carry-on, right, or your knapsack. Shlomo says, Shabbos, if you're not coming in with all of your baggage from the week, you don't know what Shabbos is. If you think that you need to come to shul, and in order to come to shul, you have to cut away a part of yourself and say, okay, and now I'm ki'ilu, I'm pretending to be, if you don't come in with your humanity, with your week, with all the struggles and the difficulties and the failures and the challenges and the anxieties and the lack of belief and the lower moments, if you don't realize that Shabbos accommodates that and holds space for that, it says we're not really connecting with the ultimate, endless, cleeless, undeserving nature of Shabbos. So he says the first thing we do, he says we turn around to see, is there anything I'm leaving in the week? Is there anything I've left behind? That's the kavana when you turn around by Bayi B'Shalom. A new kavana. Friday night you turn around and say, am I ready to bring all of me into Shabbos? Do I realize that Yiddishkeit has space for all of me as a human being? And therefore, v'noyach matzachein be'enei Hashem, can I look in the eyes of Hashem and realize right now I'm justified, and then build on that? Hashem should bless us that we should have this strong core foundation tattooed into the deepest core of our heart, and thereby have a healthy foundation upon which to build a life of truth tzidkus, of objective rectitude, of really trying to walk in the ways of Noach. Eselikim esalech Noach. Noach ish tzaddik. Tamim ha'ye b'daroisa be'ezer Hashem yishivizaycha. Siyata l'shmaya. L'chaim l'vracha.